Hi. Last we had class, we reviewed very briefly some AI standard surface shader presets. We talked a little bit about ray trace depths, which I would like to go a little bit more into with a little bit more depth now. So first things first, I have my Maya scene open. I have file. I have save scene as. I created a default workspace, and then I saved my file in that same new folder with the default workspace. Yes, sure. And then continue. All right, so I'm going to recover the duplicate special as well. So I have my object selected. If I want to create multiple instances of the same object, I can say edit and then duplicate special. And these boxes here correspond with the X, Y, and Z coordinates. So you'll see 3 boxes frequently. You'll see them in the attribute editor and other places. So when you see 3 boxes, and it looks like they might correspond to an X, Y, Z coordinate, for instance, when we're talking about how to translate, how to rotate, how to scale, they do indeed correspond. So that's the X down here, this is the Y, and then the Z, and it will always be in that order, X, Y, and Z. So if I wanted to, for instance, this is the Y, if I wanted to create 4 more instances, I could create 4 more copies. For now, we're going to always create copies. We'll get into instances later when we start talking about parents and kind of children and modifiers when we start getting into rigging. For now, make sure that it's a copy. So if I wanted to make 4 copies in the Y, X, Y, I would say space them out. So this is how many units do I want to space them out. Each unit in Maya corresponds to a grid length, so I'm going to space them about approximately 4 units apart in the Y direction. I can say apply, and then I put in, interesting, great point. I put in 4 in the translate in the Y, but I forgot I already had a 4 in my X position. So it's kind of, you remember your graphs, right? Like what was that? Geometry. So it went 4 over and then 4 up, and then 4 over and then 4 up, and 4 over and 4 up. So I'm actually don't want to do that. You can also, let me undo that, and then edit and duplicate special, and then instead change that to a negative. So it's going to go over 4 to the right and then down. So I say apply, and then you can see that steps down. So I don't want to do that. I actually just want to create 4 more along this x-axis and in the positive direction. So the positive direction when you have an object selected will always be in the direction that the arrow is facing, right? So 4 positive in the direction on the z-axis is going to bring 4 copies in front of the sphere, and then in the x axis it will be 4 copies of the sphere to the right of the object, which is what I want. So I'm going to no, I do want the 4 there. I should have waited to record this a little loopy today after all my Zooms. All right, so 4 to the right, and I can say apply, and wonderful. I've got 4 additional spheres, giving me a total of 5 spheres. So that's a duplicate special. You can also duplicate special with a rotation. So spheres are hard to tell when they are rotated. So I can duplicate special around a rotational degree as well. So I can say edit and duplicate special. And I'm going to say I want to offset around the 2, maybe 6, 8 in the X, and then maybe 8 in the Z. So I'm going to say 8 and 8. Do that a little bit too big. So YZ. And then I'm going to say rotate along this y-axis, so x, y, z. So I want it to kind of rotate around this center point. So when you give it a rotation, it's going to rotate. Imagine you stuck a pin in whatever one of these axes are, and then it will rotate around that pin. So I want it to rotate around the y-axis, and I will say 45 degrees. And then I will make, like 8 copies. And then say apply. And then I have the happy little grouping of cubes that are kind of rotating 45 degrees every time they rotate around. So this kind of axis, and it's offset 8 So I take this cube, I move it 8 spaces to the right, and then 8 spaces forward, and then I rotate it 45 degrees. Move over, and then up. Anyway, you get the idea. So this is duplicate special. It's a great way to get lots of objects evenly spaced from one another very quickly. We're gonna use it a little bit when we get into some kind of particles and physics generation a little bit later. All right, so I can set each one of these individually, so give it a new texture as individual units. So we've already covered the, make sure we're in the rendering tab. We've already covered all of the Maya native materials, which would be these. So I'm going to go ahead and assign this an AI standard surface. And I do that under the lighting and shading, which is an option that I get when I'm in my rendering drop-down menu. And I'm going to say assign new material, and it's going to be the Arnold material and the AI standards. Nope, that was hair. Don't want to do that. AI standard surface. Once again, assign a new material and Arnold, and then AI standard surface. All right, so the presets that we discussed, right? So you can use all of these beautiful presets. I'm going to give it what? I'll give it a copper, and then replace, and then I'm going to say, I need to make sure a couple things are turned on. So first things first, I actually don't have any lights, right? So I need to add some lights, and I'm going to give it an HDRI image just so that we can get up and running pretty quickly. The sky dome, and then I'm going to give it a file. I'm going to find that file, and I think it's HDRI. There we go. Beautiful garage image. And then I'm going to say lighting, use all lights. And so that will allow me to use lights in my preview window here. So it's using the sky dome to drive the lighting. I'm actually also going to make a floor so we get some shadows here. There we go. Okay. And then on door number 2, I'm going to apply, so it's Lambert now, I want to apply a new material. So I'm going to say assign new material, Arnold, and AI standard surface. And I'm going to use what? Glass, glass, glass. And say replace the existing material. So that's glass. Beautiful. And then I'm going to do the same thing. All right. So now I have these gorgeous, let me turn my film gate on. This little icon allows me, it's called Film Gate, it allows me to preview. It allows me to preview where the render edges will be, so I can kind of line up my scene with the edges of the render in mind. So I'm going to open the Arnold render view, which I can get to with this little eyeball icon. I can also, up here from the Arnold tab, open Arnold render view here. They both do the same thing. So under render, I want to run IPR. And here you can see these gorgeous textures coming through. So on the floor is just the default Lambert, and you can see it's quite noisy. So we definitely want to increase our diffuse samples. And then over here we have our incandescent light bulb, which is kind of gently lighting our scene. If I wanted to, for instance, start playing around with the kind of image, the samples in just an area, I can use this render region icon. So I click the render region, and then I can update, change the settings of my render. For instance, I can play with the diffuse setting, so increase diffuse to something like 8, and it will render up to 8 diffuse samples over in this render region, which is super duper useful because Maya is buggy and is prone to crashing. So I'm actually going to change my point of view just a little bit so that I have a little bit more of a kind of like a rotation here, so that I can kind of see through these objects. Cool. And you can see that I'm only updating the render viewport in that render region as well. It's not touching the others. In order to refresh it, I can just turn it off and then turn it back on.